Hi, hi, Scott. Thanks so much for the introduction. It's great to be here again, everybody. I'm Dr. Mary Frons, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist from New York City. And I'm here for my monthly webinar on the first Wednesday of the month, where I talk about healing relationship ruptures, particularly repairing ruptures that happen after intimate betrayal in a relationship. And that's a day-to-day conscious ongoing process. And that requires certain skills from both partners and for the couple system. It's really focused on building a new connection with new insights and skills and habits and reinforcing these over and over. And you both need lots of support for this process. So today I'd like to continue with last month's discussion, where I focused on the third stage of relationship healing and trust repair. The first stage was the crisis stage, where the disclosure came to light. The second stage is the active repair stage, where there's 6 steps the couple can go through together to really move the healing and the repair of the trust forward. And then comes the renewal stage, where you're creating a new relationship. It's not the old relationship that you had before. This is a new one where it's based on love, respect, honesty, and shared values and ideas. So in the 6 steps of the repair stage, you really learned a lot of good tools and you've developed skills for repairing the balance in the relationship, which got damaged with the infidelity. In the renewal stage, it starts when couples start to feel good about that work that they've been doing in the repair stage, when both of them feel calmer and a better connection, and where they start experiencing a new dynamic in their relationship. This is where there's new openness and transparency, there's a lack of resentments, and there's an appreciation that you each have for your life together. The renewal stage is really about building on all that hard work that you accomplished with healing and rebuilding the trust. And the focus really moves from the past to the present and the future. Because what you're working on is you're working on creating a secure, functioning relationship. And that has the qualities of safety, comfort, reliability, and fulfillment for both partners. What I'm emphasizing in this stage is better for both of you. The renewal stage is really about deepening your attunement for each other, understanding, and having the willingness to come to each other's assistance. In a relationship, there's times of disconnection in every relationship. But the important thing about attunement is that you're able to recognize when this happens and make a conscious effort to do something to reconnect. Attunement is really about recognizing and taking the steps necessary to correct a situation in the moment. It's showing that kind of interest in your partner that they really need. So when this happens, when the attunement feels like it's a little off, what you really need to do is you really need to prioritize spending time together. And it's really important to have fun in this stage of your relationship. It's important to plan events to do together where you're focused on each other and just enjoying yourselves and having a good time, putting aside all the obligations of household chores or work or the children. Having fun is what re-energizes your relationship. And it's a really important thing to remember, to make sure that you keep this in your regular schedule of things that are important. And, you know, it's better if one partner doesn't have all the responsibility for creating these kinds of opportunities. When I talk about mutuality, it's about both of you bringing energy to the relationship to do the things that are needed to keep it growing and getting stronger. Another thing that's important to do if you start to feel the attunement slipping is to do that check-in process that was so important during the repair stage. It's a really good idea to keep that check-in, there like once a week, where you just set aside a little time to discuss the status of things in your relationship, to find out What are the stresses each other are feeling? What are the challenges? What do you each need? And that way you kind of get a deeper picture into what's going on. It's making yourself transparent. And it's a way for your partner to really know what they can do to come to your assistance and support you. And lots of times, this doesn't happen automatically among couples. This is a way that you can start to implement some new habits or strategies in your relationship that will really make a difference in keeping that connection strong. If you feel the connection slipping, it might be helpful to think about the acronym MAC. And that stands for 3 very important qualities in your new relationship: mutuality, attunement, and communication. And we've talked about these in the repair steps, but in the renewal stage, it's really, really important to make sure that these qualities are always present and that you're always nurturing them, because they each rely on each other to form that foundation for intimacy. And when any of these qualities start to fail, then issues can kind of recycle into a gridlock situation. John Gottman talks about negative sentiment override. And that's what happens when frustrations build up. And then a partner might start to view the relationship in negative terms. So when you have good attunement, you can recognize those moments before they become entrenched and start to influence the feelings about the relationship. It's really important to take an active role if you notice that your partner seems, disturbed about anything. It's like you want to have the curiosity and the interest and the empathy for each other's subjective experience. Mutuality is really about interdependence that you have for each other in a positive way. Accepting influence from each other is one of the important qualities in a strong relationship, and where the caring goes back and forth. There's always going to be times when one of you needs more support than the other. It's like a good friendship where you share experiences and you influence each other. But in a primary relationship, there's a greater degree and intensity of that influence. With mutuality, it's important to think of the relationship as a 2-person system, as opposed to a 1-person system. In a 1-person system, it's like every man for himself, where there's daily concerns and decisions, and the one person kind of resolves them in their head without communication and openness with their partner, checking in, seeing how they feel about it, where things get handled alone and not as a team. In this new relationship that you're creating, it's really about a 2-person system. So if you think of it in that way, then think of that you're operating as a team, and that's what creates a secure, functioning relationship. Thoughts and feelings, they get shared freely. You don't feel threatened by your differences. Instead, differences are there as opportunities. They help you expand your perceptions and your awareness. And you can create a win-win situation where it's finding a solution that works for both of you. You want to avoid those power struggles of one up or one down. That doesn't feel good. There's always somebody that feels bad when there's a one up and a one down situation. So mutuality needs to be a core value in your relationship, where you each have a commitment that you will take an active role in making sure that balance stays in a good place. The next skill in MAC, mutuality, attunement, communication. Attunement supports mutuality. What it means is that you have awareness and sensitivity, that you can pick up signals when something is off or out of balance, and that you can take corrective action in the moment to get it right. All couples have moments of falling in and out of attunement, but the important thing is that you don't want to let that go on for too long, that you want to notice when there's a disconnection. A lot of times somebody feels like, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to bring up something that might go in a direction that I can't predict. But it's very important to have the courage to check in with your partner and find out what's going on. And you can use that check-in process. That's a very easy way to do this. And if you keep that present in your relationship and make it kind of a ritual where you ask each other, what are the challenges that you're facing? What are some of the things that you need? Then that keeps the information flowing and it keeps the connection flowing. And once there's connection, problem solving is much, much easier. So besides mutuality and attunement, the third plank is communication. You really need to have black belt communication skills in a really good relationship. That's where conflicts and any kind of long-standing relationships can start to be worked out and resolved. There might have been things that were, stresses or annoyances in the relationship that existed before the crisis of the betrayal. And you can't really address those during the time that you're in the active repair stage. That's a time when you just have to stabilize and deal with the hurt partner's needs to feel secure again, and that there is a strong commitment to heal the relationship. And once that happens, once you've gone through the repair stages and you move into the renewal stage, and you've really got improvement in your communication skills, where you can talk to each other calmly with emotional regulation, with no blame or criticism, that's when you can ask for a time to sit down and discuss a concern and discuss it calmly. And there doesn't have to be a resolution in the first discussion. It's just opening up the door to, this is a concern that we have that we want to work on and resolve. And you make a plan for moving forward with it, where it's comfortable for both of you, where nobody feels one up or one down or blindsided, where you just move through it calmly. You can identify all the various options. It's not this way or that way. It's finding a win-win situation. And that's totally possible with almost all issues. The best approach in these situations is, instead of seeking to be understood, you want to understand your partner first. So if they're the one that starts with the concern, you want to ask them, what's bothering them, what's going on, and then reflect back what you're hearing and say, did I get it? Because it's very important that they feel understood and heard. And once they feel that, that really changes the tenor of the whole conversation. It creates a positive connection that you can build on to work to get to that win-win situation. So you need to take one person's concern at a time, because you want to avoid a power struggle. You don't want one of you hijacking the conversation back to their concerns. And that's something that can often happen when a couple sits down to try to discuss something. Each person wants to make a point about what's important to them, and they're constantly battling to get that ball back in their court. But what you do when you take turns, you agree that, okay, can you express your concern first? And I'm going to tell you what I understand and what I hear until you really feel that I get it. And then, you can switch roles and the other person can express their concern, where they're not pitted against each other. And this way of discussing things works so well. I've seen it really transform couples' relationships. And a lot of times people don't like to use it because it slows everything down. But that's the point, where your limbic system isn't getting all revved up, and you're not feeling anxious or desperate to be understood. You take your time, and your partner keeps feeding back to you what they're hearing, what they understand, until you feel, yes, you get it. You understand what this is about. And these issues can be about anything. They can be about shared responsibility, about household chores, about your sexual connection, about financial issues. The content doesn't really matter. It's how it's handled that's important. And once you learn how to handle conflict in this way, where you're emotionally regulated, where you can break things down and discuss them in parts, move through it calmly. You don't have to have resolution with the first discussion. All you have to do is start building up an understanding with each other, and the resolution will come through the discussion. So, simply stated, good communication is about letting yourself be known by the reciprocal sharing of your thoughts and your feelings with your partner. So, with attunement and mutuality, your communication can become much more clear and effective without blame or criticism, which are really things that build up defensiveness and shut down the connection. You have the tools to repair a potential disconnection before it reaches a crisis point. And it's important to go back to all those tools that you learned in the repair steps, especially the check-in process and some of the communication tools like the dialogue process, so that you each feel that your concerns are heard and understood, even with the most difficult issues, and that they can get resolved in a way where you both feel supported, loved, and valued. And it's important to remember there's a difference between requests and demands. You want to start with a request to address a problem in a compassionate and non-blaming way. A request is when you're asking your partner to willingly meet a certain need of yours. And you can start that by expressing a concern and then focusing in on what might be healing for you. A demand is when you say to your partner, you know, I need this, and you say it in a very forceful way where it doesn't include options. And if you frame your connection, if you're concerned this way, maybe your partner will kind of feel that negative energy, and they might just agree because they don't want a conflict. And that sets up a situation that's going to possibly end in unconscious reactions where somebody feels bullied or that the other person is going one up on them. So they might, provide a begrudging compliance, but that can result in a buildup of resentment that comes out in other ways. Sometimes there's an issue that comes up that doesn't really have anything to do with the partner, and the feelings can get displaced on the partner. And you need to make time to sit down and communicate about what's going on. What are the feelings? What are the concerns? How does your partner see this? What's the narrative that they're putting on it? And when you hear those things, you can give your partner a lot of support and agree that their feelings are important. When you validate your partner's feelings, it doesn't mean you agree. It means that you can see them and you can understand them. And then you can move on from there to find a solution that includes their perceptions. It doesn't need to be that there's one perception of the situation that has to dominate. That's the way the old approach, where it's like it all has to be looked at from this one perspective. It's so important to be inclusive of the different perspectives. That provides a lot of respect that really helps resolve situations much faster and in a much more attuned and compassionate way, and enhances your connection. So it's not whether you have conflicts or ruptures, it's how you both work together to repair them. The more you learn to resolve these conflicts, you gain a lot of confidence that you can do this. It builds your connection. But you both need to have a mutual commitment to a way of handling the conflict, that you have an understanding, an agreement that if we have a disagreement, that this is how we proceed, where you're both on the same page about a plan, the plan of raising a concern by asking for time, expressing your concern in a non-blaming, way, and then your partner agrees to reflect back what they hear and make sure they're understanding what's important to you and what your feelings are about it. So the conflict doesn't become a zero-sum game. There's no winner and loser. It's where you create a win-win situation, and that preserves the balance and the mutuality. You want your partner to feel heard and not judged. So if either partner feels they need to withdraw and run for cover, that's kind of the worst thing you can do. I want you to remember, you can always hit the pause button. It's important to have an agreement that if one of us starts to feel dysregulated or upset in the conversation, we'll make an agreement. We'll just have a signal or a word that we can use. Lots of couples use a silly word like kittens or mittens or pumpkin pie. And that means that we just want to hit the pause button. And the person that asks for the pause lets their partner know, we'll come back to this, and give them a time when you might be able to resume. And that way you can have time to calm down and get regulated again. And that's a very, very important tool to remember to use. The couples that I see are the most successful in resolving conflicts frequently use the pause button and the dialogue process. And they learn to resolve conflicts in a way that they never thought they could before. So there's certain beliefs too that, you really have to let go of, like the belief that no matter what you say, your partner's going to have a problem with you, because that belief is a big problem in itself. You have to approach it with optimism, giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, and especially that if you ground this in an agreement that when we have a rupture or disconnection, we have a plan for how we're going to handle it, that you both can agree and follow through on. There's often a hesitancy to ask for more information if your partner's upset. But sometimes that information is necessary to really understand the problem. And sometimes your partner's not going to know why they're upset, but you can start by, they can express their feelings, their thoughts about it, and it starts the conversation, it starts the connection. But by taking that initiative and showing that interest that you have in being there for your partner, in being supportive, you can fix pretty much anything at that point. Just demonstrating your interest and your understanding, that can often be enough. When you each feel heard and understood, it creates a connection that can solve a very large part of the issues that are going to come up. And as I mentioned before, the communication needs to be supported with the ability to emotionally regulate. Many therapists say that the number one cause of relational conflict is the inability to manage emotions. So making it a priority that we will each stay emotionally regulated and hit the pause button if we feel that we're in danger of losing that ability to regulate. This can really make a huge difference. So how do you keep your relationship growing stronger? By prioritizing it. And this means spending time together a priority, not letting it get crowded out by work or childcare or chores, and to make having fun together a priority. That energizes your relationship. The task of coming up with ideas and things to do is good when you share that. And even if you have doubts that the activity will be fun, try it anyway. That novelty is a big enhancer of connection in relationships. The studies show that couples that do novel things together on a regular basis have a much stronger and fulfilling relationship. And then what about outside help? If you hit a rut and you can't seem to get past it, when you try all these different strategies and skills, Sometimes just doing a couple sessions with a therapist. It could be a new couples therapist. It could be the individual therapist for one of you. And you just sit down. You don't have to think of it as, oh, we're going into couples therapy now. It can just be a session where the couples therapist can help clarify maybe what some of the issues are that might not be clear to either of you. They might perceive things from the outside that are kind of outside of your awareness. It's a place that you can get more support and more feedback. Also, another good support system is the support groups. A lot of my clients continue with their support groups, even when they're feeling good about their relationship, getting through the repair stages. They like the place to go and get feedback and get perspective. It's good to go to your partner for that support. As you get into the renewal stage, you're wanting to develop that ability more and more, but you don't want to overburden your partner. You want to be aware of having other sources for support. Sometimes running something by your support group, it might slightly change your perception and change the way that you would bring it to your partner. Especially for the healing partner. That's the person that did the betrayal. They might be challenged with intimacy and talking about their feelings. So the men in the healing partners support group have gotten so much better about learning to lean into their relationship, learning to take initiative, learning that they need to be more transparent and open, because sometimes that withdrawal is what can start a whole negative cycle. It's having the courage to lean in and question, lean in and suggest a check-in. So if you hit a rough patch, remember the match skills: mutuality, attunement, and communication, and all the tools and the options that you've learned, and that can help you develop that sense of flow in your relationship. And that sense of flow is really the goal. It's where that connection starts to feel effortless and secure, and it promotes each other's growth and fulfillment in a really great way. Thanks for coming today and listening, and I hope that these skills are helpful and useful to all of you. So Scott, do we have any questions?
We do have some questions. We got some in the Q&A, and I've got a couple quick ones for you. First of all, this is serious black belt stuff. You used the term black belt. I was like, this is very high level renewal here. You mentioned, I want to reiterate a couple things you said. You mentioned fun. It is time to have some fun. Novelty, new fun stuff. This is so important. And speaking from the addict point of view, we often feel like we're not allowed to have fun. But when we want to repair our relationship, we need to have fun, and it does need to be mutual. I just want to reiterate that you said all that. Another thing, you used the word team. I'm big on team when we're trying to communicate. Let's not fight each other. Let's fight the problem. Let's not beat each other. Let's beat the problem. And sometimes the best we can do at some point is to agree to disagree and maybe try and resolve this later. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Totally fine. That can be a very wise way to handle something. It can be the start of an ongoing conversation where you just start that you want to work toward understanding each other's perspectives. You can break it down into, okay, the resolution will come, but we're just starting with developing an understanding. And developing that understanding might take a couple discussions, not to feel the pressure that we have to get somewhere. And by just using that tool of feeding back to your partner. So what I hear you saying, what I'm understanding, how this makes you feel, that can be a huge first step. And then, dropping it for a while. But once you give them that, that's really going to create a lot of changes in the perceptions that you bring to that. If the other person feels like they're being bullied or pressured, when you approach what they're saying that way, it really takes down those internal feelings of aggression and fight, like I have to fight to get my needs met.
Yeah. I have a question related to that. I have not had a chance to review this. This is a card game called Couple Reconnect. And, you share, like, how would you teach your child about money management? And couples are supposed, and I have a couple of couples in my level 3, well, the healing partner, as you call them, in my level 3 sex addiction work group. And they are using this game to practice sort of communicating. Do you recommend practicing
definitely. That's a great
communication on
idea.
non-issues?
And I also use things like that. Gottman has some of those cards. There's
Yes.
also something called the 36 questions that you can just search, Google 36 questions. And there are these questions that the psychologists developed, and with the premise that a couple asking each other these things, they'll fall in love with each other. I don't know if that will be the result, but it certainly does improve the connection. And, this is a good way to do something that doesn't feel so high risk.
Right.
It's just it can be fun. It can be relaxing. You learn
Yeah.
more about each other.
Yeah. So practicing on non-issues, non-fighting issues, basically, you can learn more about each other, grow closer, and also know how to communicate and ask the questions like, what I heard you say is this.
Exactly. That's a great way to practice it.
Yeah, cool. I have one more question, then we'll jump into the Q&A. Communication skills, do you use EFT? Do you use Imago? Do you use some other thing? Do you use all of the above?
All of the above. I use it's like as therapists, we all kind of develop our toolkit over the years. We're all training. I'm constantly training. I'm training in PACT therapy right now, which is Stan Tatkin's approach, which is neurobiological focused. And, Imago is great, EFT is great. So there's certain techniques and approaches that we learn from all of these things. And then we bring in what's needed whatever's happening in the moment. But
and they all come down to the same thing, though, which is kind of slowing it down and making sure I hear you and understand what you're saying, and vice versa.
Right. And recognizing that there needs to be mutuality, not one person going one up on the other, and learning about that there's influences that are working inside ourselves that we're not even aware of sometimes. And sometimes, having more awareness from our therapist of like, we're very sensitive to an issue about religion because of the role that played in our life, so that we can see that we might be bringing feelings from the past to bear, and we might, identify the problem in our partner, or maybe the problem is more in the situation. So if you can start to see when an issue comes up, to identify it as, okay, the problem is with the situation. It's not intrinsic in me or intrinsic in you. It's with the behaviors and the actions that are part of our dynamic.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to take some questions out of the Q&A here. We'll go for as long as you can hang with us. This is from the betrayed partner. Made some progress with betraying partner. However, he has tinnitus and told me yesterday he wishes he had not deleted my pictures. I'm assuming these are intimate photos, because they were so calming for him when things like his tinnitus flared up. I've been asking him to delete them for years and felt such relief when he did. However, I don't know how to respond to his wishing he hadn't done it. Should we talk about it, or should I leave it alone?
Okay, so lots of times what's important is you can hear the individual requests, like he's making this request about these pictures. Yeah. But if we look beyond the request to what is the need there, and talk about what his need is, it sounds like he has a need for some soothing, for some support. So maybe the focus would be on what other ways can he get this soothing and support. So as I was saying before, there's many options for solutions, and to widen the conversation to things that can work for both of you, that it just doesn't become one against the other. And that's a good approach to take to any kind of a concern that comes up. Look for what's the need that's driving the request.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when you're fighting the problem instead of each other. Is
Mhm.
you obviously need some comfort. I mean, if anybody's ever had tinnitus knows it's good.
Mhm.
But how can we give you the comfort? Now we're addressing the problem instead of
Mhm.
each other. So
Exactly, right.
love-
It's not a power struggle. It's not, I need this thing from you and this doesn't work for you. And it's
yeah,
very binary.
yeah. Which takes us to the next question. And I was going to ask this: what about black belt communication when one person's all in with that and the other one's not? The question here is, are there some tools to keep my partner from hijacking the conversation? Um,
I think the first thing is recognizing the importance and how, you know, maybe your default way of communicating is not in your best interests, that it's not really getting you what you want or what you need. It might, pump up your adrenaline in the moment and make you feel powerful, but that's not really um, helpful to you. It's more like a response to a powerless child part of you that feels powerless. And then you go into, well, I've got to do it my way to get out of that powerlessness. Instead, what you really want to do is be in your functional adult mode, which is where you're balanced and you approach it with more logic and with a strategy for what's really going to work, what's really going to help here. um, so uh, what was I'm losing my.
they asked about some tools to keep one of the partners from hijacking the conversation.
Oh, okay. So, in the trust solution, I talk about agreements, forming agreements. And this is what, you really need to do in the renewal stage, is like to talk about how we communicate and look at some of the tools and say, this tool really seems like it works really well. Can we try this? So you get the buy-in before, you get in the situation, that this is what we're going to try. So if one person starts, you feel that one person is hijacking the conversation and you're starting to feel bullied, then you hit the pause button. You don't try to fix it in the moment, because it's already, if somebody's already starting to be emotionally unregulated, it's probably not going to work. So you need to just kind of, each person needs to get back and out of their wounded child or adapted wounded child state, get back to their functional adult state where they're calm. It's when our limbic system is all revved up that our prefrontal cortex is not working so well. So we need to get that back online, and that takes calm. So always using the pause button and knowing that that's there, forming an agreement about that. So that doesn't become a power struggle where you're saying, oh, I need to stop, or you need to stop, or expressing it in some negative way that makes the other person feel put down. If it's an agreement, it's just, okay, we have this system. And lots of couples use, like I have this couple that uses puppies. And when they say puppies, or another couple uses blue jeans, that means we just stop, we put it down, and then we pick it up again when we can feel better.
Yeah.
And you break it down into small bits. It doesn't have to be resolved. And if you feel your partner keeps hijacking the conversation to their concerns, one thing that you can do is you can say, okay, let's focus on your concern and focus on their concern first. Ask them, what are they feeling? What's the narrative? What are they thinking about this? And then reflect back to them. So it sounds like you feel that that I was blaming you for not taking out the trash last night, and that felt really bad and you felt disrespected. Did I get it? So that's a way that by giving them that attention and that understanding, they get out of that, need that's driving them to feel heard.
Yeah. And just a reminder to everybody, particularly anybody who got here late, we're talking about the renewal stage of relationship repair. There's crisis and then there's active repair. We're in renewal. So we've had our disclosure, we've rebuilt trust, the addict has some sobriety. Now we're ready for this black belt communication stuff. Earlier, cheating partners are going to be super defensive. That's what they do. And they will hijack the conversation. That's what they do. You may not be at the renewal stage. These tools still work in earlier stages. They're just much harder to implement. When you're both at the renewal stage, you're both on the same team, you're both working to communicate better. Am I correct on that, Mary?
Yeah, the key about the renewal stage is where you're really trying to create the mutuality. In the repair stage, it's really, the dynamic is different because the hurt partner really needs a lot. There needs to be a lot of focus on the hurt partner believing that there's a willingness and a commitment to, learning attunement, learning how to communicate, doing all the things, making agreements. You need to feel that this person has the willingness to do this work. And one of the steps in the repair stage is assessing that to see if your partner is on board with that. In some couples, they don't make it through the repair stage, that one of them is not ready to move past that. And sometimes, that they hit a pause there in that part of their relationship, and they can't move forward to the renewal stage just yet. But that's where they need to really get support and go to their therapist, their support group, and kind of try to understand where they're blocked, what's blocking them, what of these steps, which is the one that they're really having the difficulty with. They feel like they can't make an agreement. Sometimes it's like around issues like transparency. One of the partners feels, oh, well, why should I give you, my passwords? I don't want to do that. And if they're stuck there and they don't want to do that, then they've hit an impasse. That kind of openness and transparency is really a necessary component of the kind of relationship we're talking about, a two-person system. And it's important to face where you are and what the limitations are. And then for the other person to recognize, okay, this is where we're stuck. And that happens. I've had couples get stuck and then they come back and they pick it up. When one person's learned and gotten a lot more support, and the support groups are so great from that because they hear the other people talk and they find out what's really worked, how things have moved to a much better state. They don't have to be in this kind of pain that they're in.
Let's take this next question here. How does a boundaries list from my wife figure in what you describe? Basically, there is zero negotiations. It's comply with the boundaries or the marriage is over. There's more to that question, but that's the bulk of it. So
Okay.
how does the boundaries list figure into what you describe?
So before the couple starts the repair stage, I encourage the hurt partner to have a list of bottom line things that they need to enter into a repair stage. It could be if one partner is still engaged in really painful behaviors, such as if they're engaged with an affair partner, that or their bottom line request might be cutting off a contact with the affair partner before they're willing to work on the repair process. Now, this list of boundaries is something that, it shouldn't be like, 15 things. I don't think that's really helpful. I think the certain things that are really important, that are most painful, that you can ask, can we, put a pause on these behaviors for now to try to find out what's possible, what kind of relationship do we want? And, so making those agreements are a way of starting the repair process and figuring out like where we can go. The 3 circles tool, I'm sure you're familiar with this, Scott, and you probably use it, which is a recovery tool that most of the healing partners learn in their own recovery. And a lot of those items that your partner might be asking for might be things that you would fit into your 3 circles anyway. So, And then there's the red circle, which are behaviors that are totally off limits, and then the yellow circle. So a discussion around that as much as possible, where you can present and share your 3 circles with your partner, and see if this is, you can have a workable agreement about these boundaries. But this might be a little difficult stage, and you probably need a lot of help from the therapists and from the groups to negotiate this. But it's really crucial, because this, you don't want to move forward with this kind of a power struggle at the basis of it. That the agreements is the 3rd step, the accountability, and then the honesty, and then agreements about what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And if you can't come to an agreement about what you're willing and not willing to do, then that needs to be the focus. I have a couple now where that's where they are. They are having difficulty with what one partner wants and what the other partner wants. It's significantly different in terms of lifestyle, but they're being honest, they're being transparent, and this is the work that they have to do so they can move forward.
Yeah, and just a couple of things. Yeah, we definitely teach the circle plan, and I love that you use red, yellow, green instead of inner, middle, and outer, which I think is confusing. I use red, yellow, green too for the circles. If you haven't done a circle plan, please sign up for our sex addiction or porn addiction online work groups, which I teach most of them. One of the first things we do is a circle plan.
It's great to get those skills.
Yeah. And then the other thing about boundaries, like if I'm the betrayed partner and I set boundaries, the boundaries are not about me controlling my partner. They're about, here's what I need to feel safe in our relationship. So I will say something like, if you continue to act out in your addiction, I will feel unsafe and unloved, and I will consider getting a divorce. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm telling you how I will respond if you behave in a certain way. That's a healthy boundary. If I say, you will quit this or else, not so much a healthy boundary. I need to keep my boundaries about me. And you said in the longer version of your question, your wife's boundaries have been reviewed by a couple CSATs. So I suspect they're worded that way, even if you're not interpreting them that way. So I would look at them as your wife trying to feel safe, which is a very healthy thing for her to do, particularly after you've cheated.
Right.
How you doing, Mary?
Good. So that's a really good point, right? That's it's not a demand, it's a request that I'm making this request of you. So in order to proceed with repair, these are things that I need to be able to work on repairing our relationship, because otherwise I feel too scared, too anxious, and unregulated.
Yeah. So are you up for more questions here?
Yeah, we could do a couple more.
Okay, great. Next one, we are still in the very early repair phase of the relationship. We haven't even had disclosure yet, so we're in crisis. We've had conversation and my husband becomes dysregulated, angry, and he will angrily take a pause, but it feels manipulative to me. How can we constructively use a pause without it being a manipulative tactic to avoid the conversation? Great question. Again, early recovery versus renewal, very different.
Very different. And keeping that in mind, it's a really good point, Scott, about this is a process, and you've got to modulate your expectations as you go along. You start with the most important things, for safety, for security, and have agreements around those important things. That if he becomes dysregulated and you do hit the pause and he's angry, that's something that he needs to deal with. He needs to, get help from his supports to learn that skill. He doesn't have that skill yet, but at least he's adhering to your agreement by taking the pause. So it's a process. So of course that, that's something you would want, for him not to be angry, and that's hurtful and difficult to deal with. But, protecting yourself and getting support for yourself. Okay, what can I do when he, exits because of his anger? It's like, I have a client right now that's dealt with that very frequently. They couldn't even do the check-in process because the healing partner would become so dysregulated. But she learned to go to her support system, to use that and exit and create a boundary around herself in order to move through this, as long as he's working at it and is willing and trying. And that's the key, the willingness. Does your partner have the willingness to keep working on it? Do you see their words and their actions continuing to match up more? Do they express the desire to learn to become more regulated? Hearing what their take is on things when it's calm, asking them how did they feel about it. And if the way they respond is with blame and criticism for you, trying to turn it around into your problem, that tells you something, that they need to do more work on accountability before you're really ready to move forward with repair.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a normal stage of early healing. Next one, related, but from a different person. My husband is easily overwhelmed and has learned to ask for breaks during communication, to the point where he takes many breaks during a single conversation. Can taking breaks become I'm going to add the word dysfunctional coping mechanism, and no longer a helpful tool? Or is it okay to take multiple breaks?
So, what I would look at, and I don't know if this person with this question has done any work with a couples therapist, but I think what you want to look at is there too much? Is it really too much for him to handle at this point? It's like watching what you try to deal with, to ratcheting it down to like one piece at a time, taking this in terms of pieces, so that there might be, the overwhelm might be coming from too much. It's a difficult question because it can be manipulative. It can be somebody just exiting all the time. But, that would be, you'd be stuck in that place if the person is just exiting all the time. And then I think, it would be a good thing to maybe get a third party involved to talk about that, to see if, his awareness can be raised to, he has other choices. He doesn't always have to exit so frequently, that both of you have other choices. Maybe the hurt partner can, ratchet down the amount of what he can handle at one time, so he can stay engaged, and that he can stay engaged and perceive a different result if he stays engaged and he sees it getting resolved. So taking very small things where he can start to feel more confidence that he doesn't have to, that's not his only strategy, is taking off, that he needs to build up his confidence that he can be successful with this. And sometimes maybe a therapist can help him. A support group is really a great thing because he hears other guys, I say men, but it could be either gender, talking about, how it works for them. And then he starts to see that modeled in front of him and gains more confidence to continue trying it. Yeah. It's always like modifying. If something's not working, try to modify it. Try to take it, Sue Johnson says, slice it thinner.
Yeah. Let's take one more here. Okay. Today is the 1-year anniversary of D-Day. I am struggling a lot more than I thought I would. Which I think is normal, especially for betrayed partners. I feel like I'm thrown right back to that day. He's still not able to show up for me with empathy. What do I do?
Yeah. So when you say he's still not able, could you repeat that sentence about he's still not able to show up?
He's still not able to show up for me with empathy.
Okay. So lots of times, the lack of empathy is like a very protective device. Empathy is giving, and it comes from when we feel a lot of deficits, we don't know how to give. So providing empathy, it can be something that wasn't, it's not really promoted in certain cultures, and the words and how to do it can be very foreign and feel unnatural. So, if he could get some support and learn that sometimes it only takes simple sentences, like if he had simple sentence stems, like it must have felt bad when you experienced this, or I hear that when you were watching that movie on TV, it was really painful for you. Just learning a few simple sentences. And that's what his support group or his therapist could help him with. Sometimes it helps to have a conversation, the couple to meet with one of the therapists and talk about the issue or the problem. So the therapist is aware of a skill deficit that one partner is really struggling with, but they don't have the words to put on it. He doesn't know how to say, I don't know how to show empathy. But that can be a problem. Learning just how do you do it? How do you express it? What words do you use can feel very foreign. So, it doesn't mean that the willingness to do it isn't there. Sometimes it's just a skill deficit.
Yeah. Yeah, and empathy can be learned. We teach that to addicts,
Mhm.
but it takes time because addicts, even if we had empathy to begin with, our addiction pushes us so far away from empathy. Not only does it push us away from your feelings, it more importantly, from our perspective, pushes us away from our own. That's why we engage in it. We don't
Mhm.
want to feel anxious or shameful or whatever. So it's a long road back, and until you can get empathy from your partner, you're going to have to do what you're doing today, which is come here and get it from Dr. Frons and myself, and go to your support group later and talk about this. You're doing the right stuff. You're here,
Mhm. Mhm.
and you're
Mhm.
talking about
Mhm.
I'm having a horrible day.
And if
Um,
your partner has support, that's a really good place for him to learn what's needed. And, maybe he might want to read my book, because I break these things down into very, very simple skills that takes the mystery out of this. It's like, this is not as hard as you think it is.
yeah, Dr. Franz's book is called The Trust Solution. Again, you can find it on Amazon, and again, it is highly recommended. It's pretty much must reading if you want to heal your relationship. Um, Thank you, Dr. Frons, for being here. She gives us and you her time once a month, which is awesome. We are so grateful for that. Thank you, everybody, for showing up, for having great questions. And Dr. Frons will be back next month.
Thank you
And
so much, Scott. It was such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great week. Take
okay,
care.
see you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.